The disclosure of Jesus Christ in the book of Revelation began many, many years ago with a promise from God to a man we have come to know as Abraham. The author of the first book of the Bible recorded an event in the life of this man that would forever shape history. According to one of the descendants of Abraham, the God of glory said unto him, Get thee out of thy country, and from thy kindred, and come into the land which I shall show thee. In this promise, Abraham, then known as Abram, was told, I will make of thee a great nation, and I will bless thee, and make thy name great, and thou shalt be a blessing. Then God added, In thee shall all the families of the earth be blessed. Unfortunately, by the time of the writing of Revelation, the majority of the children of Israel were not prevailing as God intended. The greater part of Israel in the generation of the destruction of Jerusalem had rejected the one who was destined to enable them to prevail and become the great nation promised to their father Abraham. Paul was quick to point out, however, that the failure of the majority of Israel to prevail was not in the promise given to them by God. Although the greater part of Israel failed to be triumphant as God had promised Jacob, there was a remnant of Israel, true Israel, that remained faithful to the plan of God for the ages, as Isaiah had prophesied. Though the number of the children of Israel be as the sand of the sea, a remnant shall be saved. For example, Paul himself was of the children of Israel, and with other descendants of Abraham, accepted Jesus as the Christ, the Messiah of the promised great nation. Concerning the number of the children of Israel who accepted Jesus as the Messiah and remained true to God's plan for the promised nation, Paul used the Old Testament example of the prophet Elijah. He wrote how the prophet maketh intercession to God against Israel. Elijah had said to God, Lord, the they is a reference to biological descendants of Abraham, they have killed thy prophets and digged down thine altars, and I am left alone, and they seek my life. Paul then raised the question concerning what God said to Elijah about his intercession against Israel, and then revealed the answer. Paul wrote that God told Elijah, I have reserved to myself 7,000 men who have not bowed the knee to the image of Baal. Although the majority of the children of Israel in the time of Elijah were killing the prophets of God and destroying the altars of God, there were still some of Israel who were not bowing down to false idols. Paul would then say, even so then, at this present time, the time of his day of writing, also there is a remnant according to the election of grace that hath not rejected Christ. Although they may have been few in number in Paul's day, compared to the majority of the natural descendants of Abraham, this remnant would in fact allow Israel to still be a people who prevail. All the promises in the Old Testament concerning the glory and the promise of Israel that God had promised would still come to pass in the remnant of Israel that had accepted Jesus as their Messiah in the days of Paul. The writer of Revelation would say of this remnant, These are they which follow the Lamb whithersoever he goeth. These were redeemed from among men. being the firstfruits unto God and to the Lamb. These descendants of Abraham, the remnant in Paul's day, were the firstfruits unto God and to the Lamb of true Israel. However, this promised great nation would not only consist of the biological descendants of Abraham who walked by faith, but would also be composed of people from all nations who also walked by faith. The people of Israel who were promised to be able to prevail could now experience that long-awaited kingdom, established with judgment and with justice from henceforth, even forever. The consummation of the plan of the ages promised to Abraham so many years prior to the coming of Jesus was now fulfilled. Through the metamorphosis of the old into the new, the physical kingdom of Israel had given birth to the spiritual kingdom of God, true Israel, with all of its power and great glory. This is the exact message recorded by John in Revelation chapters 14 and 15. These two chapters reveal in capsule form what was actually occurring in the generation between the resurrection of Jesus and the death of the Jewish sacrificial offerings in the temple. It was the beginning of the new and the ending of the old. John recorded that he looked, and lo, a lamb stood on the Mount Sion, and with him 144,000, having his Father's name written in their foreheads. The reference to 144,000, 12,000 from each of the 12 tribes of Israel, is symbolic of the remnant of Israel that had accepted Jesus as the Messiah, the Christ. John identified just who was the remnant of Israel. He recorded, "These are they which were not defiled with women, for they are virgins." He recorded that these are they which follow the Lamb wheresoever he goeth. He would add that in their mouth was found no guile, for they are without fault before the throne of God. These 144,000 servants of God, sealed with the name of the Lamb's Father in their foreheads, figuratively represented the remnant of true Israel, redeemed from among men, being the firstfruits unto God and to the Lamb.